But what I wanted to just bring up tonight a little bit is in the chanting we also do the Bodhisattva Vows, and something that's really important as a kind of basis for our practice, in addition to the meditation. And I don't even really think meditation is the basis of our practice. The basis is the vows that we take. Those are the basis, the vows, meaning the type of commitment we make about the kind of life we want to live. And meditation is helpful to see where your mind is, but it doesn't mean much if you haven't made that commitment. It's like, then what's the point? You know, you can be meditating, but without it being on a path to really, greater harmony and goodness, your practice is just selfish. And that's how most people involved in yoga and meditation are practicing to feel better for themselves. And good teachers will say, if you're feeling worse, then your practice is working. Because you're seeing the nature of your mind and you're not avoiding the pain that you have in your body and in your heart. Like, you're not avoiding that. So actually, you see it in a magnifying glass and the petri dish of yourself, and you get to know all that's there that you're going to have to deal with. So, not that you should suffer by practicing, but that the goal is not to feel good. Let's put it that way. That's a side effect if it happens, but it's not the intention. The intentions come from our vows that we make, the Bodhisattva Vows and the Refuge, and the great vows. So I just wanted to mention those vows tonight, because it's a way, if we don't make them on a daily basis, at least weekly basis, or just to consider them now and again, to give us a bit of a frame, a bit of a framework for our practice. The three great vows are to cease from causing harm, to cultivate good, and to actualize good for others. Those are the three great vows, and they sort of, are so comprehensive and big, but they put everything in perspective. If you ask yourself, like, why am I here? Well, it's not a complicated question. Many people struggle with, like, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose? Why am I here? And these vows just kind of, simplify things for us. Like, everybody has their own specific path, but whatever path you choose, as long as it's fulfilling those three vows, go for it. But make sure it's doing that, which is ceasing from causing harm. That's already gigantic, and you can examine a lot of the choices we make and a lot of the thoughts and reactions we have. And with that vow in front of us, we may make different decisions. It may clarify, okay, well, this is going to cause harm in some way. Or this won't cause harm in some way. Fine. That's a great measure right there. And it's really simple. But simple doesn't mean easy, because then when we start to see the way we live our lives, there's a lot of, small harms, micro harms that we cause. Microaggressions. It's just all the time. Like with the way we consume, with the attention we give others, with the care we bring into things. There's a lot of sort of collateral harm that is caused, that we are responsible for. So when we start to take that vow a little more seriously, it just creates a certain sense of care. just taking a little more care. And that's helpful. Cultivating good, which is the second sort of broad vow. Cultivating good, and then we have actualizing good for others. At first you may think, well, why are there two vows like that? Because cultivating good is what we do first in our minds. You can't actualize good for others unless you first cultivated, a pure heart in your own mind and some clarity in your awareness. Because if you're quite confused, it's hard to know, like, even how to help, or even to realize there's somebody outside of you. So cultivating good means that we want to increase that intention, right? The care, the compassion, the loving kindness, the sympathetic joy. We want to increase those qualities in our minds, and that's cultivating good. And our meditation practice is really helpful for that. And we can spend sessions, and you should, cultivating metta, loving kindness, on a weekly, if not daily basis, for a few minutes. Cultivating compassion, meaning seeing the pain of others and wishing that they didn't have that. And it starts to reframe the way we perceive the world. We see it as a field of dukkha that needs to be relieved. And everywhere you look, you see that there's suffering going on. Even the suffering and the happiness and the joy. When people are happy and joyful over things that are very temporary and then attached to it, it's going to cause them suffering. And you see the suffering even in the joy. And you start to then feel sorry for that. There's so much suffering and confusion because of our misunderstanding of truth. That everything really is impermanent. That dukkha is really, universal. And that our sense of self is really mistaken. Those three natures of reality. And because we don't deeply realize that, then we don't know how to cultivate real goodness in our hearts and minds. Because we're still sort of lost in our own self-interest. And finally, actualizing good for others. Well, that naturally comes out of purifying your heart and cultivating greater loving kindness and compassion. So how can I express this? How can I live this more fully? So these three vows we take of ceasing from harm. We're never done, making that vow. That vow we need to make on a daily basis. I want to get through this day and cause less harm than I did yesterday. and tomorrow you'll have to make that vow again. Right? Cultivating good. What are my intentions here? What are my intentions when I go to work, when I study at school, when I ride in my car, when I go for a walk, when I go to the supermarket, when I do whatever it is I do? What are my underlying intentions here? And it doesn't mean it needs to be this heavy thing that you're contemplating all the time. Just you kind of set the tone for your day. And it just makes life a lot clearer. We're not lost in all sort of, what do I need from everything. It's kind of a bit of a relief to not have yourself in the center of the universe. It is like, to give yourself a break, it's actually a relief. And you think more about what others need and less about just what I need. And even if you can't help somebody, and even if you can't help people who are far away from us, like all the terrible things that are happening, we can approach what we learn about the world with more care and more compassion. And so what we learn about the suffering in the world, it can reinforce our sense of compassion. So, cease from causing harm. Cultivate good, meaning the right intentions in your mind for why you're here. Loving kindness and compassion. And then try to express that in your relationships. This is what our meditation is about. It's about seeing when your mind is not there, and it's very lost. And then coming back to some of the basics, like just being more present and lost in your own self-centered thoughts. I just had an encounter with a student of mine. She came to me after class just now, right before here, and that's why I was like, just came in at the last minute. She came to me and she said, "Sorry, I missed last class, but I was attacked." Like, what? She was walking on the street over here on Ben Zekai, and someone jumped her from behind and threw her down and stole her phone. And her head hit the pavement and she had a concussion. Called the police and she was apologizing to me for missing class. And you know, all the nonsense that like goes through my mind and all the self-centeredness, it's just like when you hear about real suffering, it just drops away. It's like this person is, you know, and what she just went through. And though I was so sorry for her, I couldn't help but also think about the person who did that. And think about how terrible it must be to have a mind that is always like, doesn't care about causing harm and won't think about it afterwards. And all for the sake of like a phone. You know? And how that mind, how he has no way to change that mind right now. And that mind will continue on that path until who knows what he meets. And the suffering and the cycle of suffering and the interconnectedness of suffering there, her suffering, his suffering, and everyone's suffering, how it just spreads. And when we take these vows, we step out of that vicious cycle. Okay, we step out of that equation, and it's so essential, you know, that if one more person can do that, can step out of that, then a huge change has been made. And you don't step out of it once; you step out of it again and again. In the same way, in our meditation, you notice that your mind is back thinking about, oh, you know, I'm tired, or complaining, or when is he going to ring the bell, or, you know, what was going on earlier today, or plans for tomorrow, whatever it is, wherever your mind goes. And then the next moment, you notice it, and you're just back with the equanimity of sitting here, the samadhi of being calm and focused. And then your mind goes again. But every time your mind like drifts, you're more qualified to bring it back because you've just done it again. And each time you bring it back, you're more qualified to do that again. You know, it's a mind training. And so these vows are mind trainings as well. So the second vow of saying cultivating good is a real important approach of saying that what we're doing all the time in our practice is cultivating good. We're cultivating a certain mind. And we should take that seriously because you're not a finished product. Like some of us have longer karma than others and more deeper patterns. It just means you have to keep cultivating it for many years, for the rest of our lives actually. And these vows are lifelong practices. Now there are vows before the vows. And the vows before the vows are called taking refuge. And that we don't just make the vows thinking, okay, these are good things to do. But because there's something called, you know, the Buddha Dharma Sangha, we take refuge in that of trusting that there's a path to enlightenment, trusting that there is a way to be a kinder, more loving, helpful, more clear human being. There's an actual practical way to do this. And the Buddha Dharma Sangha is how it was transmitted. And that type of refuge, which is, an act of faith, is really experiential faith, which is kind of to differentiate it from blind faith. We're not saying we're having faith in something we can't see or touch or learn from, but Buddha as the sort of, not the historical Buddha, that's one thing, but the nature of your mind, the clarity and the goodness and the unselfishness of the mind. And each one of us, if we're sitting here, is because we have touched that part of our mind. And that's what we rely on, that's what we take refuge in. Is yes, I can access that. I have, and I will. And the Dharma meaning that there are teachings that will help me do that. There are teachings that will help me realize the nature of my mind. And I can rely on that because I'm checking them out. And the Sangha is simply that there's a sort of community of sentient beings that are here to help you do that. And also here to help you practice that. And not only does the Sangha support you, but the Sangha, the human Sangha, is your place of practice. That's where you're going to cease harm and cultivate good and actualize good for others. So the Sangha is your place of practice. So that's kind of the vows before the vows is the refuge we take. And the refuge is based on your experience of your own mind, of the teachings that you explore, and of the people you're with. So what I invite us to do is to practice with our vows more consciously as much as you can. Meaning to take refuge, however you understand refuge. There's traditional refuge, but the refuge of really trusting and relying on your own mind. And the deep clarity and goodness that is the nature of being human. To really trust that. And to really aspire and consciously try to follow a path in life that is a spiritual path to perfection. And not see it as a hobby, but see it as the most important thing you can do. And thirdly, look for Sangha wherever you can find it. Yeah, there's Buddhist Sangha, but there's a human Sangha. And you'll find the human Sangha wherever you are. Wherever you're with other people, you'll find people to offer your practice to. And those are the people who then are supporting your practice. And then, having taken refuge, naturally the three grave precepts, we call them, like really the big precepts we take of ceasing harm, cultivating good, actualizing good for others. And that just naturally comes out of the refuge you've taken. And your sitting then is just like another expression of that. Right? But don't consider your sitting to be your practice. Your vows are your practice, and your sitting is one way that is expressed. Anything anyone like to add tonight?
On Shabbat, I was reading that what gives vows so much weight or gravitas is that you're making a pledge to the future. Like when you say saving all sentient beings or any kind of vow, it's like you're actually controlling in some way the future because you're making a commitment to realizing something. That's one of the reasons we're prohibited from making vows in Judaism, is because it's kind of an act of control that also then has a lot of weight in the fulfillment of it. But the fulfillment of it, that until the vow is fulfilled, it creates a disequilibrium in your life, because there's this, like even in something about closing the gap, closing the circle, that there's this expectation or lack of, so the word they used was equilibrium, until the vow is fulfilled. And so it made me think of Zen and this idea of vowing to save all sentient beings. And I don't know, I've always been a little wary of taking the vows. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a different approach to vow.
Okay.
Yeah, like a different. And yeah, I know the vows, and and then on Yom Kippur you release, on Kol Nidre you release the vows, and there's a sort of whole thing about vows in Judaism, because they are seen as, well, to whom are you making the vow? That's one thing. That's one thing. Okay, and it's sort of, because there's God involved.
Mm-hmm.
The vow is very much something you make, from yourself to the world outside of you, whether it's to other people or to God. So there's a sort of contract you form, right? Here, in the perspective of the Dharma, the vow is purely to yourself. It's setting intention. That's what the vow is about. It's setting intention. It's not even future oriented. It's present oriented. So the vow is placing you here as to the type of person I want to be now, not like some distant place, not some distant future. So it's very much between you and between now and now. So it's kind of an orientation. It's reorienting my present, and that's kind of how the vow is like, I don't hope one day to fulfill this vow. I'm fulfilling it now, as soon as I say it, and at the same time, I know, because my mind is fickle and untrained, I'm going to be kind of missing that vow. It's more like a target that I keep aiming at in my present moment, like archery, and I know that I miss it, and then I string another arrow, and like I keep trying, but I do have like I have a target in mind. So it gives my life direction to where, to how I act now. But it's present oriented. But it's kind of odd to say. Maybe it's even an oxymoron to have a target for the present, but that's what it is. Like, it's a target for my present. And that's how I understand vows here.
That's very helpful. And then the saving all sentient beings, like, are we saving them from suffering? Isn't all life suffering? Is that what we're saving? Is that it? Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's such a heavy word, saving. Like,
yeah, I know. And I don't even know what I mean. There are even different translations and different traditions, and you've you've seen some, and they probably chant it differently, right?
No, I've always heard saving all sentient beings. I mean, the sentient beings, I imagine, are the breathing, living, but the saving, I guess it's from the harm.
Yeah, well, it's again, someone asked Suzuki Roshi, what does it mean saving all like sentient beings, and you know, how can I save all sentient beings? And he said, one at a time. And the point is that it's kind of seeing that everybody needs our help, right? Like everyone needs our help, and whoever I meet next, that's the person who I'm going to offer something to. So instead of it being like that I'm going to actually, you know, be some sort of messiah and a messiah complex, that I'm going to enlighten each person, or all people, I'm going to enlighten them. It's again creating that sense of reorientation that I don't have to wait to help. Like whoever's in front of me needs help. Okay? So recognizing that dukkha is universal means that everybody I meet needs some assistance.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
I had one description of this particular vow as in saving all sentient beings from myself.
From me?
Yeah, that's ceasing harm. At least, you know, if I can't make you enlightened, at least I'll cease harm. I'll stop harming you.
Hi. Can you explain the relationship between the vows and enlightenment? And another question, if the enlightenment is about being human in any way, or is it beyond the human being?
Yeah, well, we never get beyond being a human being. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about this, I find, about this tradition, is that the Buddha remained a human being who lived, ate a bad meal and died. But like he was a human being, and his normalcy, his humanness, was sort of the example for everyone else. That like a human being became enlightened, so can you. So that's kind of the message of the human Buddha, that it's not a prophet or a god, you know. And the statue should never be confused with it being something superhuman. So that's one thing, is that enlightenment in humanity is more a sense of becoming what it really means to be human, like realizing your full potential as a human being. That for most of our lives, sadly, we don't even touch a small percentage of that potential. So we end up having to, according to the Buddhist tradition, go through many lives to do that, because each life we barely scratch the surface. But irregardless of many lives or this life, it's about being a fully human being, which is way more than what most of us kind of imagine. And the connection between vows and enlightenment is that these vows, and before I take the vows, or until I take the vows, most of my life is lived for myself, and kind of in a pretty selfish state of mind. So the vows are some of the first steps of trying to break that cycle of selfishness, and trying to disengage a little bit from just living for myself. Because part of the enlightened state of mind is to realize that self and other are not separate. So even before we've realized that in our mental space, the vow helps us behave in that way. So even if you haven't had enlightenment, you can behave enlightened or more enlightened. And then your mind might catch up.